She couldn't think straight. Her head felt like she had run headlong into a wall. Wait, it hadn't been a wall, it had been a workstation, as her tether had snapped tight after their inertial dampeners had failed. She couldn't open her eyes, something sticky was caked over them and she couldn't get them open. She started to panic, raising her arm. Or tried to. She was strapped down. Then she heard voices. She still couldn't move, she tried to speak but only managed a slight groan. Get in. She heard CMC Dylan's voice. There's no time. Yelled Hadara. Her last order was to not let them reach Sol. She heard a scuffle and then a door slammed shut. Something exploded, and she felt herself nearly flattened by the G-force of what she knew to be an escape pod. No. No. What was happening? Damn it. She heard Hadara yell, along with some others crying. So others had made it out. Just what had happened after she had passed out? A secondary explosion suddenly jerked them sideways. Everyone brace. Something struck the pod, causing it to go into a spin. She felt sick. Nauseous. And completely fucking helpless. She tried to speak again. This time a louder groan escaped, but she doubted anyone had heard her. She tried again to force her eyes open and managed a crack with her right eye. She could see her cheek was very swollen. The spinning was slowing down too, and she recognized the person sitting next to her was weeping, her hands covered in bandages. Was that CME Erica? She couldn't tell, her eye had started watering as soon as she had opened it. Barbara managed to move her right hand, managing to clinch it into a soft fist. What the hell was wrong with her? Try not to move, Captain. Specialist Urail's familiar Orion face popped into her sliver of vision. Don't worry, I think we managed to stop them. I don't know what war gods you humans worship, but they surely favor you. She shook her head before continuing. Stay still please, Doc will be here as soon as he can. Omar NY. She managed. Why the hell couldn't she talk or move? She had barely managed those 2 words and not very well. Everything was numb. We don't know, Captain, said Urail. Barbara could see the Orion's face contorting in a grimace in her helmet. Good, she's. A proximity alert went off and she heard a bunch of people's voices rise. She couldn't discern the rest of Urail's words over the sudden octaves of the collective voices, but Dr. San's face briefly came into view. He gently opened her right eye and shined a small light back and forth. Then he was gone from her small frame of vision. She felt a small prick as the doctor injected her with something in her neck. Then he came back into her view. He was saying something. What was it? He looked like he was the Walking Dead. Of course, she could only see him vaguely through one damp eye barely open. How many wounded had Doc seen since the start of the battle for Sol? Too many was the answer she immediately had snap into her mind. He was saying something to her. She had to focus. She could feel whatever he had given her starting to work. She could almost see it working as her cheek seemed to be less swollen than it was a few moments ago. She could almost make it out, she just had to focus harder. Been flung into Earth's gravity well. The tug tried to catch us, but it's going to get rough, Captain. Please try not to clinch up, it will cause more damage to your spine. Her what? Spine. No. No time for that. The pod's interior grew brighter and brighter as it began to buck. She could hear the anti-grave engines start whining as they exerted their maximum thrust to slow them down. Only a few moments after that the pod jerked violently, slowed drastically by a large parachute that had popped open once the onboard sensor had indicated atmosphere. The pod still slammed into the ground hard. Not as hard as ODT pods, but hard enough Barbara felt her body jerk, a searing fire burning through her before she lost consciousness. Her eye snapped open. She was staring at a light. Why was it so bright? And cold. It was so cold. What happened to her other eye? It wouldn't open. Captain Barbara Thornton, can you hear me? Came a soft female voice. Blink for me if you can. The voice seemed to be above her, but all she could see was the light. She blinked. A couple of times just to make sure. What was happening? Good. Before we begin, I'm required to inform you you are on Earth, specifically at the San Francisco Medical Research and Development Center. Your parents have been informed of your condition and will be on their way as soon as possible. We need your permission to go any further, so we woke you. I'm sorry, your spine was fractured and in the process of repairing it, your nanits took some damage, probably caused by the massive EMP bursts. We can repair it, but it's going to require your permission to proceed. She paused, and Barbara heard a man clear his voice from the other side of her. Sir. She heard the woman say and could tell she stepped away. Hello, Captain Thornton. I'm Dr. Yasacho. I am sorry we couldn't meet under better circumstances. I will now explain to you what the problem is, and how we intend on fixing it if you'll allow it. The man leaned forward, blocking the light enough for her to make out his brown eyes. A medical mask covered his face almost completely, except for the clear glasses resting on his nose. Blink if you're following me. She did, slowly, and he continued. Okay, firstly, your old personal nanits ceased working along with everyone else's within the blast radius. Their emergency backup systems mostly failed. Overloaded essentially. So at the moment, your nanits can't help your body heal. He took a breath and held up a data pad angled for her to see. It was showing her an X-ray view of her spine. It had a spot circled, labeled 4th, 5th, and 6th vertebrae. She could see they looked like one solid piece of bone instead of 3. As well, your left shoulder, jaw, cheek, and eye socket was fractured. We could not save your arm, I'm sorry. By the time you reached us, there was just too much damage, even after everything Dr. San managed. Perhaps if your nanits had been functioning they could have saved it. He paused, taking a breath before continuing. I believe we can help you if you permit us. With surgery and a neural overlay to help with your damaged nerves. President Owlen ordered us to clear this with you first before we proceed. If yes, please blink twice. Time is of the essence here, and I've been told regardless of your decision we are to respect it. If however, you don't receive the overlay in time, I'm afraid your condition will remain permanent. She stared at him for a moment, processing his words. So they could help her, but the president had ordered them to clear it with her first. She grudgingly admitted she was starting to like him, even though she hadn't voted for him. She blinked twice, slowly, deliberately. She was being honest with herself. The thought of being paralyzed scared the shit out of her. If there was any chance of fixing her spine, she would take it. Even if she had to deal with this neural overlay thingy. Okay, then are we free to proceed with the recommended procedure? Blink twice for acknowledgement, please. He asked again. She hadn't understood basically anything he had explained past the probability of her walking again. It didn't matter. She carefully blinked twice. You all witnessed the confirmation, let's proceed. Came the woman's voice again as a mask descended over her face, and she drifted off into dreams of her time spent with Gregory, on Mars Station. Are you sure about this, sir? His aide asked. President Owlen looked at the report. The operation had been a success. They had gotten her permission to proceed, but it still worried him that she hadn't fully understood everything exactly. He knew she didn't. After all, none of the doctors had been of a high enough clearance to know what they were putting in Captain Thornton. They all thought it was a normal neural overlay. And she was going to be pissed when she realized it wasn't just an overlay. She would probably hate him for it. He wouldn't hold it against her. He looked up at the portrait of his late wife Elizabeth. She had been killed on Proxima Centauri BS habitat rings by Eladrin sappers while visiting with her sisters on vacation. He looked back at the report. Her brain scans matched perfectly with what they needed. She was only one of 5 candidates in the entirety of United Sol Alliance territory even capable of syncing with the new AI lattice. And the only one of those 5 who had proven again and again to be not only reliable but resilient too. I am. He answered. The lattice had been completed for nearly 2 months, and the longer it was not synced with an actual person the harder it would be to get it to sync. At least that was what the techno-wizards that created it had reported. Something about self-maturation limiting the time frame. And another could take as long as 2 years to produce anything close to this model. He had intended on asking Captain Thornton himself after the Hind project had officially started, but it looked like she had accepted earlier than anticipated. "How's the optics looking?" He continued to stare at the report. He had read it 100 times but still couldn't shake the feeling he could have done more. "Sir, Captain Thornton and her crew are being credited with stopping the Varil from reaching Earth or Luna." His aide cleared his throat before continuing. "They suffered severe losses. Captain Barbara's weapons officer CMC Dillon manually overrode the safety on the refuge core as a last resort to try to stop the Varil landing ship. To be frank, sir, nobody can understand how the refuge stayed together to intercept the dropship, but it had. The civilians of both Earth and Luna are demanding an award be given to the crew and captain who were willing to sacrifice so much to protect them. I have already drafted a few options available, sir." The man held out a hard copy which he took. "I see," Owland said as he read over the list. "Captain Thornton is going to hate me regardless, isn't she?" He sighed, glancing up at the portrait of Elizabeth again. "Guide me, what should I do?" "I can't decide for you, sir. I can say I don't envy you this." He shrugged. "Either way, she's probably going to hate you one way or another. Might as well try to get some benefits out of it." His aide grimaced at the last, knowing how much he hated politics getting involved in anything. "Well, she can only hate me so much, after all, she did give her consent to the doctors." He pointed at the third option on the list and said, "I like our third option, set it up. I was already planning on visiting the hospital anyways." They continued to discuss the upcoming schedule. He was only half listening though. He didn't like doing this to her. He would do his best to make it up to Barbara, he decided. Looking back up at the portrait of Elizabeth, he knew that was the only way he could live with himself. "Activate, sequence Zeta 47 Omega. Initializing neural overlay syncing." This must be what the doctor had explained, a neural overlay. Okay, good, that meant the surgery went well. Right. Initial overlay complete. Secondary overlay awaiting compatibility confirmation. Compatibility confirmation? What the hell, doc? You fuckers didn't test it or something? She thought, panic starting to build. Confirmed. Subject, Barbara Thornton. Download initiated. Download in progress 1%. What the hell? Download what? Barbara asked. There wasn't anyone that answered, of course, and she suddenly had a sinking feeling in her subconscious that she had inadvertently agreed to way more than she had thought at the time. Nope, she corrected herself. If she was being honest, she hadn't been thinking of anything but not being paralyzed. And she'd agreed to whatever it was willingly. Like an idiot. She sighed, mentally palming her forehead. Download at 54.7%, initializing avatar handshake. Avatar handshake. Hold on. This sounded more like a fucking Navy R&D blacklist project you heard whispers about but never anything solid. Shit. Those fuckers had maneuvered her right into their damn political webs. She should have declined the letter of marque, hired a civilian captain for the refuge, and turned her into a short-haul freighter passenger ferry. She was so angry she could scream. Download at 78.1%, avatar handshake accepted. The voice went from a generic synthesized digital voice to a completely different, female voice. "Hello, Captain Thornton, it's good to meet you finally. I'm your guide, and Avatar Maun." The voice giggled. "Me?" she asked in her head. Hello, Maun. Do you, happen to know what's going on? Obviously." She didn't even know how to continue. Thankfully Maun seemed to understand. "You have been implanted with the newest, most advanced neural AI currently operating for the U.S. Alliance Navy. My naval designation is the USS Hind, Titan class. But you can just call me Maun, Captain. Download complete. Sync complete. Avatar handshake complete. Standby." "Fuck," Barbara said. That was all she had. She was blank. As soon as Maun had said, "currently operating for," she realized she was stuck. A sharp pain lanced through her left temple and her right eye snapped open. She was in a dimly lit room, probably still at the hospital. She blinked twice, and a little screen popped up on the edge of her vision displaying a lot of different things, but the one that was selected said Link Optical Circuit Confirm. She simply thought about accepting it and she felt a link snap into place with a painful pinch behind her left eye. What was that? She spoke, her words garbled, barely understandable. But her vision cleared, and she was getting other readings now too on the side of her vision. She could not only understand it as fast as it scrolled past, it didn't seem to impede her vision, so she didn't mind it. That was your neural network accepting the new optical nerve with the assistance of your new nanits. Came Mound's voice in her head. Barbara tried to raise her left hand and could only barely raise it off the bed she was lying on, and that was accompanied by excruciating pain shooting through her shoulder. Please be patient. It's going to take a while to fully recover from your wound's severity. No, Ed. She managed. A light suddenly filled the room as a door opened on the far side. She couldn't move her head but could distinguish two sets of footsteps. They stopped at the foot of the bed. Just out of her sight without tilting her head. "Woish it?" she asked, brokenly. "She's awake, get the doctor. Hurry." That sounded like her father. How long had she been out? Approximately 31 hours, the procedure only took 5. Said Mound, answering her silent question. "Barbara, you be still now. Don't try to move much yet. They just gave you the nanits not 2 hours ago. They had to rush them in because of the EMP damage to most of the system. Doc said they're having a hell of a time with the wounded, but it's starting to look up." Her dad said, taking her right hand in his and squeezing it gently as he moved beside her bed. "I'm here, and your mother will be as soon as she can get your brother settled. Don't you worry about anything except getting better." An alert popped up to the side of her vision reading the incoming data file. Was this a built-in data cheat? Well, that's not my intended function. I can assist my owner with various tasks. Mound replied in her head. "Especially when it pertains to us." She giggled. "What are you, 16 or 17? Barbara asked in her head, which elicited even more giggles from Mound. She focused on the file blinking restricted access. She selected the file, and a torrent of data was displayed. She let out a gasp. "Oh no," she said out loud. "It's going to be okay, Barbara," her dad said, trying to reassure her as she heard fast-walking footsteps come through the door. "Barbara, this is Dr. Satcho. The operation was a success. We managed to replace the vertebrae and reconnect your neural pathways. Everything should feel a bit fuzzy," said Dr. Satcho, moving a small pen light over her eyes. "Yes," came her slurred response. Everything was a little fuzzy, but she was sure she could feel her toes. "Good, then your neural overlay was accepted. We were worried after we connected it the monitor shut down. We couldn't get another scan. We assumed it was the interference caused by the inert nanits in your body at the time of the scan." He tapped something on his datapad before taking a small device from beside the bed and slowly moving it back and forth over her head and torso. "Everything is looking just fine right now. Just stay patient. Those new nanits are the most advanced yet. They're already working 3 times as well as the previous version." He stopped waving the device over Barbara, sitting it back on the table next to the bed. "However, it can take several days for your neural overlay to fully connect to your nervous system and you to fully regain motion and mobility. I see that the nanits are doing a great job of knitting you back together." He tapped a few things on his datapad and continued. "I see your new optical nerve was accepted and linked. Good." He smiled down at her. "I'll be happy to inform the rest of your crew you're improving. Maybe they'll be more amenable." He trailed off as he left the room, still typing on his datapad. "Honey, they're saying you and your crew are heroes. I didn't like how the press was posted outside the hospital. And I've heard a rumor the president is here to thank you all personally." Her dad stopped, shaking his head, and lowered his voice to a conspiratorial level. "And you didn't tell me or your mother about this Gregory fellow. Nice young man. He picked up a bouquet setting out of her view. He was really worried about you, Barbara. He'd probably still be here if he hadn't been ordered to help maintain the second hypergate. He wish air, she said, her eye getting a little wider in surprise. She heard Maun giggle.